The first thing they heard was the breathing. Not the ragged, terrified gulps coming from Officer Daniel Ruiz as he pressed his bleeding arm against his vest, or the sharp, controlled inhales from his partner, Officer Maria Blake, as she kept her gun trained on the door. This was heavier, wetter, like something dragging air through teeth that were never meant for speech. The metal door of the maintenance shed buckled again, hinges shrieking in protest. Dust sifted from the low concrete ceilings in lazy curls. Behind them, shelves rattled, tools and boxes jumping with every impact. Outside, just beyond that thin slab of metal and the cracked cinder block walls, something big paced in the tall grass and growled. "Maria," Ruiz whispered, sweat shining on his forehead. "What time is sunrise?" She flicked her eyes down to her watch and swallowed. 23 minutes. Another impact. The door jumped inward an inch, then snapped back. The chain they wrapped around the handle and shelf groaned. Dust drifted down onto their shoulders. Ruiz let out a broken laugh. "We just gotta last 23 more minutes. Easy." Maria didn't answer. She shifted her stance, tightening her grip on the Glock, and hoped he couldn't see how badly her hands were shaking. Because the truth was, 12 minutes ago, she had watched that thing take 3 bullets to the chest and keep coming. And if it broke through before the sun came up, there wasn't going to be anything left of either of them for the day shift to find. 3 hours earlier, it had been a boring night. Third shift out of Eastwood Precinct was always the same. Domestic calls, noise complaints, the occasional DUI weaving his way back from a bar, needing a ride in the back of a cruiser instead of a tow truck. Out past the edge of the city, it got even quieter. Industrial lots, empty fields, the kind of darkness that didn't have the decency to be broken by streetlights. Ruiz liked it that way. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, the radio humming low under the soft crackle of static. Beside him, Maria scrolled through something on her phone, the screen lighting her freckles and sharp cheekbones in blue-white light. "You're gonna lose your eyesight staring at that all night," he said. "You're gonna lose your job if you keep talking instead of watching the road," she shot back. "You see the kind of gratitude I get?" he said to the empty back seat. "I bring her coffee, I let her pick the music, I don't even complain about her sad girl playlists. They're not sad girl playlists, they're emotionally complex. And this is how she repays me." He'd been on the job 8 years, she'd been on it 5. They weren't partners by accident. Some lieutenant had looked at their files, their temperament, and decided, yep, if we're sending anyone to weird calls on the edge of the city, it was these two. The radio crackled loud enough that Ruiz flinched. Dispatch cut in. "Unit 231, 1021. Ruiz reached for the handset. 231, go ahead. 231, possible 1092 at 641 Old Quarry Road. Caller reported screaming from inside the old Crestline Sanitarium. Line disconnected. No answer on callback. Nearest unit, please respond." Ruiz frowned. Old Quarry Road. Crestline. Nobody went out there anymore. "Dispatch 231, we'll take it," he said before he could stop himself. Maria looked up from her phone. "We will?" "Closest," he said. It was a lie. He had no idea if it was true. "Besides, you ever been inside that place? Kids in my neighborhood used to dare each other just to touch the front gates." "Yeah, well, the kids in my neighborhood broke into foreclosed houses and set them on fire," she said. "So my threshold for spooky is a little skewed." He flashed her a grin, but it dimmed a little as he flicked the turn signal and took the exit that led out of the city's glow. The further they drove, the more the world thinned out. Fewer houses, more open space. The lights behind them became a dome on the horizon instead of the sky above them. The stars were sharp out here. The moon was sharper. It hung huge and swollen above the fields, a pale, almost colorless disk, just a few hours past full. "You didn't say anything about that," Maria muttered. "About what?" She nodded up through the windshield. About the big horror movie moon. That's just the emotionally complex lighting, he said lightly, but something in his chest tightened. Old Quarry Road turned from asphalt to cracked, patched concrete. Up ahead, the silhouette of Crestline Sanitarium reared up, a broken, toothed shape against the sky. He'd seen it in daylight once, driving past on the way to a call. Even then it had looked wrong, like a place that had soaked up too much of the world's badness and rotted from the inside. At night, it was worse. The building was 4 stories of crumbling brick and black empty windows. The front steps were cracked, rusted railings sagging to one side. The old sign, once proudly announcing Crestline Psychiatric Hospital, hung crooked, half the letters missing. No cars in the front lot, no lights on in the windows, just wind whispering through the weeds pushing up through the asphalt. Ruiz pulled the cruiser up near the front walk and killed the engine. The sudden silence felt loud. "Dispatch 231, show us 1023 at Crestline," he said into the radio. "Copy 231, dispatch replied. "Be advised, no further calls from that location. Time is 3:17 a.m. "Got it." He clipped the radio back onto his vest. His phone buzzed with a weather alert. Cold front moving in, chance of fog. But the little bar in the corner was already down to 1 bar of service. "Phones are crap out here," he muttered. "You getting anything?" Maria checked. "Barely. This place must be in some kind of dead zone." "Lucky us." They both got out, the air hitting them like a cold hand. The wind smelled like wet dirt and old leaves. Ruiz checked his flashlight, then his sidearm. Maria did the same. Their boots crunched on gravel as they walked up the fractured sidewalk. "Okay," she said. "We got a disconnected call, somebody screaming, and an abandoned psych hospital. On a scale from 1 to this is how horror movies start, where are we at?" He smirked. "I'm gonna go with this is how promotions start. When we find some teenagers vaping in there and drag their asses out." She huffed a laugh, but her eyes stayed on the dark doorway up ahead. The front doors were long gone, nothing but a yawning black rectangle and the faint smell of mold wafting out. Graffiti covered the walls inside. Tags, slurs, crude cartoons, symbols that meant nothing and everything. "Police," Ruiz called into the dark. His voice bounced around and came back thinner. "This is Officer Ruiz with the Eastwood Police Department. If anyone's in there and needs help, call out." Silence, then a faint metallic clink from somewhere deep inside. "If that's a raccoon," Maria whispered, "I'm still shooting it." "Body cam on," Ruiz said, ignoring the shiver that ran up his spine. He thumbed the little button on his vest until the tiny light blinked red. Maria did the same. It was a habit. You go into some place bad, you turn on the camera. They stepped over the threshold. The air inside was colder. Staircases rose up on either side of the lobby, their banisters broken. The tiles underfoot were cracked and filthy, the checkered pattern barely visible beneath the grime. Their flashlights swept over peeling paint, old notices tacked askew on corkboards, a toppled wheelchair on its side like a dead animal. "Hello?" Maria called. "Police, if you can hear me, answer." Somewhere upstairs something thumped. Not loud, just enough to make it clear that the building wasn't as empty as it looked. They exchanged a glance. "Top down or bottom up?" Ruiz murmured. "Top down," she said. "If someone's hurt and tried to hide, they probably went higher, not into the basement." "Fair enough." They started up the left-hand staircase, boots echoing. On the landing, they passed an old poster laminated and sun-faded, still clinging to the wall. "Mental health is health too." Someone had scratched horns onto the smiling cartoon doctor. Second floor, patient rooms, long hallways branching left and right, doors hanging open like mouths. Their flashlights slid over flaking door numbers, metal beds pried apart for scrap, bits of glass and plaster crunching underfoot. A cold draft slid along the corridor, raising goosebumps on Ruiz's arm. "Police!" he called again. "If you're in here, answer!" This time he thought he heard something. Not words. A shuffling. The soft scrape of something dragging across tile. "Left," Maria said, nodding her chin. "Came from down there." Her voice was steady, but her free hand had tightened on her vest strap. They moved together, slow, professional, flashlights cutting through dark. The rooms they passed were all the same. Bed frames like bones, overturned cabinets, graffiti. Then, halfway down the hall, they reached a door that was different. It was closed. Everything else in the place gaped open, hinges snapped, locks broken. But this door was shut tight. A rusted metal sign hanging crookedly from a single screw. Restraint room. The sound was coming from behind it. Something shifting. Slow. Wet. Ruiz's mouth went dry. "Eastwood Police," he said, loud enough to be heard through the door. "If you're in there, answer. We're here to help." Silence. Then, very faint, a whisper. That was all it took. Training kicked in. Procedure. You didn't leave a possible victim behind a locked door. "On me," he murmured. He holstered his flashlight between his teeth for a second so he could try the knob. It turned, but the door wouldn't budge more than an inch. Something heavy braced against it from the other side. He spat the flashlight back into his hand and swore softly. "Hey!" he shouted, pressing his shoulder into the door. "Step away from the door. We're going to force entry." The whimper came again, higher now, desperate. "That's real," Maria said under her breath. "That's not some prank." He nodded once. Count of 3. 1, 2. He slammed his shoulder into the door. It rattled, but held. On the second hit, something gave way. The old wood cracked. The third impact blew the lock apart, the door flying inward so violently it banged against the wall. The room beyond was small, bare. No windows, just a drain in the center of the floor and dark stains on the cracked tiles. And there, huddled in the far corner, was... "Jesus," Maria breathed. It was a man, or had been once. He was naked from the waist up, skin stretched tight over bones that looked wrong beneath it, too sharp and too long in places. His fingers were claws, nails thick and dark. Tufts of coarse hair clung to his shoulders and spine. He stared at them with wide yellow eyes, pupils a thin black slit. His lips peeled back from teeth that were too many, too sharp, too long. Those teeth were red. He had been eating something. There was nothing else in the room. No body, no furniture. Just the man, the stains, and that smell. Copper and meat and something like wet fur. For a second, nobody moved. Then the man's head snapped toward them, and he hissed. "Sir," Ruiz managed, the word catching in his throat. "We're with the police. We're here to..." The man moved. He crossed the small room in a single impossible lunge, launching himself at them on his hands and feet like an animal. His fingers caught Ruiz's vest, yanking him off his balance. Maria's gun came up. She fired. Once. Twice. The shots were deafening. The thing jerked as the bullet struck, but the momentum barely slowed. They hit the hallway floor in a tangle, Ruiz's flashlight skittering away. The man, the thing, landed on top of him. Its breath was hot and foul on Ruiz's face as it snarled, teeth snapping inches from his throat. He jammed his forearm up under its chin on instinct, trying to keep the mouth away. Pain exploded through his arm as teeth sank in. He screamed. Maria fired again. The bullet took the thing on the side of the head, snapping it sideways. It slumped, heavy, dead weight pinning Ruiz to the floor. The silence that followed the echo of the gunshots was thick and buzzing, filled with their gasps. "Danny," Maria said, dropping to a knee beside him. Talk to me, you with me? He stared up at the ceiling, his arm burning like it was on fire. The thing's blood was hot and slick on his vest. Yeah, he panted. Yeah, I'm... Jesus, your arm, she said. He forced himself to look. The bite mark was ugly, deep crescents torn into the meat of his forearm, ragged and already swelling. Blood oozed from the wounds, dark and thick. He swallowed, bile rising. That's gonna need more than a band-aid. Don't be an idiot. She ripped open his first aid pouch with her teeth and wrapped gauze around the arm as tight as she dared. He hissed, but didn't pull away. Dispatch, she said, reaching for the radio clipped to her vest with shaking fingers. Dispatch, this is 231, officer injured. We need EMS at Crestline Sanitarium. Code. Her hand closed on nothing. She stared at the empty spot where the radio should have been. It must have ripped off in the struggle. She looked around, nothing on the floor but plaster and old dirt. Your radio, she said sharply. Check your radio. Ruiz rolled over painfully onto his side. The weight of the dead thing slid off him with a wet sound. His radio, too, was gone. The metal clip on his vest was bent, snapped. I had it, he muttered, panic starting to edge into his voice. I had it when we came in. It must have... when he hit me... Okay, she said, more to herself than him. Okay, it's fine. We've got phones. They both pulled their phones out. No service. Just two mocking words where the bar should be. No signal. They looked at each other over the dead body between them. The building had gone very, very quiet. Maybe if we get outside, Ruiz said, trying to haul himself to his feet. We're not that far from town. I can drive with one arm. They never made it to the stairs. The first howl froze them where they stood. It started low, somewhere deep in the building, and rose until it was so high and sharp it hurt their ears. It vibrated in the walls, in the floor, in the fillings of Ruiz's teeth. It wasn't a coyote, and it wasn't a dog. He'd grown up in a neighborhood where dogs were alarm systems and fellow inmates. He knew what they sounded like. This was wrong, bigger, older. It was answered by another from somewhere outside, closer this time, echoing off the brick and into the night. Maria slowly turned to look at the thing they'd shot. It lay on its back in the hallway, chest still. The bullet wound in its head was a crater, bone and brain and blood. But the body was changing. The hair on its shoulders seemed to be retreating, sliding back into the skin. The fingers that had been claws were shrinking, bones crackling softly as they shifted. The teeth, too long and too sharp, ground against each other with a faint scraping noise as they pulled back, blunting, rearranging. Its face, already slack in death, smoothed until it looked like less of a monster and more like a man. Just a man. Danny, Maria whispered. Tell me you're seeing this. I really wish I wasn't. Another howl. This one so close it sounded like it was right outside the broken window at the end of the hall. They both raised their guns, as if bullets were still a comforting idea. That sounded like it came from inside the building, Ruiz said. Which is weird, she replied tightly. Because we're on the second floor and I really don't feel like finding out how it got up here. Somewhere below them, something heavy crashed. A door slammed against the wall. A pipe rang like a bell. There were more of them. Stairs, Maria said. We need to move. They retreated the way they'd come, flashlights jittering as they jogged, Ruiz's arm throbbing in time with his heartbeat, each step sending a spike of pain up his shoulder. How bad? Maria said without looking at him. I've had worse. He lied. They reached the stairwell, or what was left of it. The middle section of the staircase they'd used was gone, a jagged gap yawning between floors. Rusted rebar jutted like bones from the broken concrete. Great, Ruiz said. that definitely wasn't like that when we came up here. The howl that answered him was barely a floor below. They both swung their flashlights downward. At first, all they saw was darkness and dust dancing in the beams. Then something stepped into the light. It was tall, much too tall. Its back hunched to avoid scraping the ceiling. But even like that, it had to be 7 or 8 feet. Its fur was dark, patchy in places where skin showed through like old scars. Its head was wolfish, but wrong. Too broad, muzzle too short, eyes too intelligent. Those eyes glowed when the light hit them, sickly yellow-green. It stared up at them and smiled. "Danny," Maria whispered. "Why is it smiling?" He didn't answer. His throat wouldn't work. The thing put one hand, or paw, on the broken concrete and pulled itself up as easily as a man stepping onto a curb. Its claws gouged furrows in the stone. "Back," Maria snapped, firing. The bullet hit it in the shoulder. It staggered but did not fall. It snarled then, a deep, chesty sound that seemed to roll up from somewhere older than language. Ruiz fired too, more on instinct than aim. The shots punched into the fur and muscle, jerking it again. It didn't die. Instead, it leapt. They threw themselves backward as the creature's upper body burst over the edge of the broken stairs, claws raking the air where they had been a heartbeat ago. "This way," Ruiz yelled, grabbing Maria's sleeve with his good hand and dragging her down the hallway to the right. Behind them, the thing roared. The sound of it hauling its bulk up through the gap was like a car being crushed. They ran. The hallway blurred, doors flashing past. Somewhere a metal cart lay overturned. Ruiz clipped it with his foot and nearly went down. Pain lanced up his bitten arm as he threw his hand out to catch himself on the wall. Maria grabbed his vest and yanked him upward. "I'm good," he gasped, even as black spots swam in his vision. Behind them, claws tore into tile. The monster was faster than it had any right to be, its snarls getting closer with each pounding step. They sprinted. The hallway dead-ended in a door with a push bar, half covered in graffiti. "Emergency exit only. Alarm will sound." "Promises, promises," Maria muttered, slamming into its shoulder first. The door stuck for a second, swollen in its frame. Then it burst open and they spilled out into the narrow metal landing clinging to the side of the building. The night air hit them like a slap. The world outside was pale under the moon, the weeds in the lot shivering in the wind. Below, the metal stairs spiraled down 3 floors. Some of them were missing, twisted and bent. "Go." Maria shoved him ahead of her. "Move." They clanged down the steps, the whole structure shuddering under their weight. Somewhere above, the exit door crashed open. They didn't look back until the second landing. When they did, they saw the werewolf in the doorway, silhouetted in the light from the hall. Its shoulders brushed both sides of the frame. It stepped out onto the top landing. The metal groaned under its weight, bolts squealing. They bolted again, jumping the last few steps when they ran out and landing hard on the gravel below. Ruiz's knees buckled. He caught himself with his injured arm, screamed and kept moving. The grass around the back of the hospital was waist high. Rusted HVAC units loomed like dead machines. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, barbed wire glinting along the top. "That way," Ruiz pointed to a dark shape near the far corner. "Maintenance shed or something. We can hold up there." They crashed through the weeds, ignoring the seeds and the burrs clinging to their uniforms. Behind them, metal screeched. They risked a look back. The werewolf was halfway down the fire escape. The landing it stood on leaned dangerously away from the wall, bolts tearing free slowly, screaming. It leapt the rest of the way, landing in the tall grass with a heavy whomp that shook the ground under their feet. It lifted its snout and howled, a terrible, triumphant sound. "You ever think about making better life choices?" Ruiz wheezed. "Every day," Maria shot back. The shed was small, concrete, a single metal door streaked with rust. The window beside it had been smashed years ago. Maria fired into the empty frame, clearing out the remaining shards of glass, then hauled herself through, scraping her vest. "Come on," she shouted, reaching back. Ruiz shoved his gun through, then his good hand. She grabbed and pulled. For a second he got stuck, shoulder armor catching on the frame. Then it gave, and he tumbled into the darkness of the shed on top of her. They scrambled up, sucking in breath. Ruiz kicked the door shut and rammed the bolt. They listened. The howl came again, closer but muffled by concrete. Inside the shed it was pitch black, save for a thin line of moonlight sneaking through the broken window. It smelled like oil and dust and damp. Ruiz fumbled his flashlight back on. The beam swept over shelves lined with old tools, boxes of nails, coiled lengths of chain. In the center, a rusted red gas can sat next to a pile of mildewed tarps. Maria's eyes flicked over the tools. "Okay," she said, voice high with adrenaline. "Okay, we just need a plan." "Plan?" Ruiz repeated faintly. "Sure, step 1, don't die. Step 2, improvise." Something hit the side of the shed, hard. Dust sifted from the ceiling. The impact was followed by a second, then a third. Whatever was out there was hitting the walls, testing them. "Cement," Ruiz muttered. "It's cement. It can't get through cement." As if in direct response, claws began raking against the metal door, shrieking down the length of it in long, slow strokes. Both officers flinched. "Or," he added, "maybe it can." They dragged one of the heavy shelves in front of the door, the metal legs screeching on the floor. On the shelf, boxes rattled, a hammer clattered to the concrete. The thing outside hit the door again. The shelves jumped. The bolts groaned. "Sunrise," Maria said suddenly. "You asked what time sunrise was." It was just after 5, right? Before we came out here?" He thought of the alert on his phone earlier. "Yeah, a little after 5. What time is it now?" Ruiz checked his watch with trembling fingers. 4:37. Okay. So we have 45 minutes? He gave her a look. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "If we can last that long, maybe it goes away," she said, words tumbling over each other. "I mean, that's the lore, right? Sunrise, werewolves go poof or whatever. Turn back or die or something." "Maria," he said slowly, "are we really basing our survival plan on movies?" She pointed at his bandaged arm. "You got bitten by what used to be a guy who turned into that thing. So I'm thinking the separating line between movie rules and tonight is pretty much gone." The door shuddered again. 45 minutes, he said. "We can do 45 minutes." They both knew it was a lie. The werewolf outside circled the shed. They could hear it, massive paws squelching in the damp dirt, its heavy body brushing against the walls. It snuffled at the broken window. A hot gust of breath pushed dust from the sill. They held their breath. The creature's snout shoved through the empty frame, jaws working, teeth snapping at the air. It was too big to fit its head all the way in, but that didn't stop it from trying. Maria raised her gun and fired twice point blank into its face. It recoiled with a yelp that was more animal than monster, blood spraying the wall. It snarled, furious now, and slammed its shoulder into the side of the building. Hairline cracks splintered through the concrete. "Okay," Ruiz gasped. "It can't get through quickly." "That's not exactly comforting, Danny." They scavenged. They found a length of chain and wrapped it around the door handle and shelf, securing it as best as they could. They stacked boxes and old paint cans, anything heavy, against the door. Every hit from outside shook their little fort apart a little more. "Hey, you're staying with me, right? You're awfully quiet over there." He realized he'd been staring at his arm. The bandage was soaked through now. The white turned an ugly gray red. His whole forearm throbbed with a deep, pulsing ache. The skin around the wrap felt hot. Too hot. "I'm good." He lied again. "Your lips are blue," she said. Just cold." He wasn't cold. If anything, he was burning. A fever had settled under his skin, making the edges of the world go fuzzy. His ears rang with more than just the creature's howls. "You know my kid's science project, right?" he said suddenly, words spilling out because if he didn't talk, he was going to think too hard about the pain. "The volcano? The one with the baking soda?" He wanted to add food coloring so the lava was more realistic. Maria blinked. "I remember you saying something about that, yeah." He was so mad when I told him we had to do the write-up first before the fun part. Told me I was ruining science. Ruiz laughed weakly. "I promised him we're gonna do it this weekend. Real lava, food coloring and everything. He wants to film it for his YouTube channel with like 12 subscribers." "Then you better not die in a concrete shed behind an abandoned hospital," she said, "because that would super ruin his weekend." He smiled, even as the room swam. "You?" he said. "You got anyone waiting for you?" She hesitated, color in her cheeks even in the dim light. "My sister," she said finally. She doesn't really have anybody else. If I check out, she's alone. And I already promised to be the embarrassing aunt who claps too loud at all her future kids' recitals." Another hit. This one made the shelving unit jump an inch. The bolt bent visibly outward. "We're getting out of here," Ruiz said. "We got too many people to annoy." The fever rose. Time blurred. He drifted in and out, Maria's voice an anchor in the dark. She talked about nothing and everything. Stories from the job, dumb mistakes from the academy, gossip from the precinct he'd pretended not to care about but secretly loved. "You remember that guy with the ferret?" she said as the werewolf paced, frustrated outside. "The one who insisted it was his emotional support weasel?" "It bit me," Ruiz mumbled. "Yeah, on your other arm. See? You're fine. You survived the ferret. You survived this, too. You'll be the only person in the precinct with both a ferret bite and, whatever that is." He snorted, then winced as the movement sent pain lancing up his shoulder. At some point, the pounding stopped. The sudden silence was a living thing. Ruiz only realized how constant the impacts had been when they were gone. "Did it give up?" he whispered. Maria tilted her head, listening. The world outside the thin walls had shifted. The wind had picked up, whistling around the corners of the shed. Somewhere far off, a bird called. The night didn't feel completely night anymore. There was a different quality to the darkness, a thinning at the edges. "Check the time," she said. He did. His eyes had to refocus on the numbers a couple times. 5:06. Sunrise, the app on his phone had told him earlier, was at 5:11. "It's close," he said. His skin crawled. They waited, barely daring to breathe, as the silence stretched. No more bangs, no more claws scraping on concrete. Just wind and their heartbeats. "Think it left?" he whispered. "I don't know," she said. "But if it didn't, I'd rather not be in here if the walls decide to give up." They started dismantling their barricade as quietly as they could. The shelf scraped the floor. The chain clinked. Ruiz's bitten arm ached so badly he had to clench his teeth to keep from groaning. The bandage was soaked through, the edges of the wound visible now, angry and swollen. The veins below it looked darker than they should. He pushed that thought away. They eased the bolt back on the door. Maria raised her gun. "On 3, she whispered. 1, 2. She yanked the door open on 2, not 3. Old habit. Never hit the number you announce. Early dawn seeped into the doorway. The sky was no longer black, but dark blue. The horizon in the east just starting to glow the faintest gray pink. The lot behind the hospital sprawled out before them. The tall grass shivered in the cold wind. The fire escape on the side of the building sagged, half torn from the wall. There was no sign of the werewolf. No blood trail, no massive paw prints, just emptiness. "Maybe it can't be in the open when the sun comes up," Maria murmured. "Maybe we got lucky," Ruiz said. He didn't believe it, not really, but he wanted to. "Car," she said. "We make it to the car, we're good. Even if we don't have radios, we can drive until phones get signal." They stepped out, guns up, sweeping their flashlights over the grass even though the light was growing. The air was bitter cold. Ruiz's breath puffed in front of him, but under his skin he felt like he was boiling. The walk across the lot felt longer than it had when they came in. Every swish of grass sounded like something moving. Every shadow seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at it. They rounded the corner of the building. The cruiser sat where they'd left it, parked near the front steps, a solid, comforting shape. "Thank God," Maria breathed. They were 10 yards from the car when Ruiz staggered. His knees buckled, the world tilting wildly. He would have gone all the way down if Maria hadn't grabbed his vest. "Hey," she shouted. "Hey, stay with me." "It's fine," he slurred. His teeth chattered even as sweat poured down his back. "I'm fine, just dizzy." His vision pulsed in time with his heartbeat. For a second, he saw two Marias overlapping and blinking out of sync. She dumped him into the passenger seat, yanked his seatbelt across, and fumbled with the buckle. As she rounded the hood to the driver's side, Ruiz stared blankly out through the windshield. The sky was brighter now, a smear of pale gold on the horizon. The first thin lines of the sunlight were starting to touch the tops of the trees. He blinked. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the world shifted. The color drained from everything. The sky went white, not blue. Maria's face, visible through the windshield as she opened the driver's door, blurred at the edges, her scent hitting him like a wave. He could smell her. Under the sweat and the gun oil and the hospital stink, he could smell her fear. Sharp, metallic. It made his mouth water. His gums ached. Maria slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door. The motion snapped everything back into normal colors, normal shapes. "You still with me?" she demanded. "Yeah," he croaked. "Just tired." She squinted at him. His eyes looked strange. It wasn't the redness or the dark circles. It was the color. For just a second, when he'd looked at her, his irises had seemed almost golden. Then he blinked and it was gone. She put the key in the ignition. Nothing happened. She frowned, turned it again. The engine didn't even click. The dashboard stayed dead. She stared at it. "You've got to be kidding me." "The battery?" he started. "It was fine when we got here," she snapped. He didn't have the lights on, the radio, nothing. It shouldn't just... From the corner of his eye, Ruiz saw movement. He turned his head, slow, like it suddenly weighed 100 pounds. At the tree line beyond the cracked asphalt of the lot, something stood in the shadows between the trunks. Tall, dark, watching. As the first real ray of sunlight speared over the horizon and touched the hospital's broken brick, the shape stepped backward and melted into the trees. Not running, just gone. He shivered. Maria looked where he was staring and saw nothing and swore viciously. "Fine," she said, chewing on the decision like it tasted bad. "We walk. Road's not that far. Once we get a little distance, we'll get service and call it in." "You can't leave the car," he said automatically. "Policy." "Write me up later," she said. "I'm not sitting here waiting to see if your furry friend decides round 2 would be fun." He tried to laugh. It came out as a cough. They got out of the dead cruiser. and they'd barely taken 2 steps when a distant siren wailed. Maria froze. "You hear that?" Over the rise, beyond the trees, the sound grew louder. Not 1 siren, 2, maybe even 3. "Someone called it in," she said. "Maybe dispatch got worried when we didn't check back." Relief flooded her face so fast it made Ruiz's heart ache. A minute later, the first squad car crested the hill, red and blue lights strobing in the gray dawn. Another followed, behind them, an ambulance. They pulled into the lot fast, tires crunching gravel. Doors flew open. Officers spilled out, vest half fastened, face drawn tight with worry. 231, you two okay?" Sergeant Hines shouted, jogging toward them. "We couldn't raise you on the radio. What the hell happened out here?" Maria opened her mouth. She looked at Ruiz. He leaned heavily against the hood of their cruiser, his bitten arm cradled against his chest. His skin was pale, but there was a sheen sweat on his temples. His eyes, when they met hers, were human, brown, tired. There was so much she could say. Monster, werewolf, men turning into something else under a full moon in an abandoned sanitarium. But she imagined the report, the looks, the whispers in the locker room. "Got attacked by something," she said instead. "Wild animal, maybe? Big. Fast. We lost our radios in the struggle. My partner's arm hurt bad. He needs a hospital, and we need this place locked down." Hines swore under his breath. "Damn it. All right. EMTs, let's move." They swarmed Ruiz, easing him into a stretcher, strapping him down. He protested weakly, then gave up, eyes slipping closed as someone started an IV. Maria watched, arms crossed tight over her chest. Hines stood beside her. "You sure you're okay, Blake? You look like hell." "I feel like hell," she admitted. "But I'm standing. I'll live." He grunted. "You can ride with your partner if you want. We'll get a couple of guys to clear the building, see what kind of wild animal left those marks." She opened her mouth to argue, to insist on being part of the sweep, but her legs picked that moment to remind her they'd been running and shaking and bracing against concrete walls all night. "Yeah," she said instead. "Okay. I'll go with him." She climbed into the back of the ambulance as they loaded Ruiz. As they pulled away, siren yelping, the hospital receded in the rear windows. For a moment, she thought she saw something in one of the broken windows on the 2nd floor. A pale face, yellow eyes. Then the angle changed and it was gone. The EMT closest to her was checking Ruiz's pulse, his pupils, the bandaged arm. "How's he doing?" she asked. "Feverish," the EMT said. "Infection setting in fast for something that happened, what, an hour ago? Might be something in whatever bit him. We'll get him on antibiotics as soon as we hit the ER." "Yeah," she said softly. "You do that." She found herself staring at his hands, the nails. They looked normal, human, except around the cuticles, the skin was darker than it should have been, almost bruised. The nails themselves seemed thicker, as if the keratin was building up faster than normal. Probably just the lighting, she told herself. Outside, the sky brightened, the sun nudged higher, chasing shadows back to the edges of the world. They said it was a dog. That's what the report said 2 weeks later, when the department finally released an official statement. Officers responded to reports of a disturbance at the abandoned Crestline Psychiatric Hospital. While investigating, they were attacked by a large feral dog, or possibly a wolf, which then fled the scene. One officer sustained a severe bite wound and is currently recovering. The building has been condemned and will be demolished. No further threat to the public. People liked that version. It made sense. It fit into the world they understood. The officers who swept the building hadn't found any bodies. No dead half-transformed man in the restraint room. No massive paw prints. Just claw marks, deep ones, higher than any dog should have reached. Those went to the unofficial stories. Ruiz was out of the hospital in 5 days. The doctors said it was fast recovery for a bite that ugly, but hey, he was young and relatively healthy. They loaded him up with antibiotics and sent him home with strict instructions to rest. Guess that means no more promotion runs through haunted hospitals for a while. He joked to Maria when she visited, dropping off his favorite coffee and a stack of paperwork he'd have to sign eventually. He looked good. Better than he should have. His eyes were bright. Almost too bright. The bandage on his arm was smaller now, the wound healing faster than seemed fair. "You sure you're okay?" she asked. "Like, really okay?" He smiled, but it was a little tight at the edges. "Doc says I'm fine. Says I probably won't even have a scar. Might not be able to impress anyone with my cool battle wound story, but I'll live." She didn't laugh. "Do you remember all of it?" she asked. His eyes drifted toward the window where the afternoon light slanted in. "Yeah," he said after a long moment. "I remember enough." He turned his arm slightly, studying the bandage. "Sometimes it itches," he admitted. "Like, deep, under the skin. And sometimes at night I hear things, I think." "Hear what?" He shrugged, looking embarrassed. "I don't know, just everything. The refrigerator in the kitchen, my neighbor's TV through the wall, the cat 3 houses down in heat. It's probably just trauma, adrenaline, brain playing tricks." "Yeah," she said. "Probably." She didn't mention the call she'd gotten from one of the guys on night shift a few days ago, about a neighbor near Crestline who'd sworn they'd heard something howling in the woods. Or the way the hair on the back of her neck stood up when she'd heard it through the static on the recording he'd sent as a joke. They sat in silence for a minute. The normal sounds of the neighborhood outside, the distant whoosh of traffic, a kid yelling something about a soccer ball, a dog barking. "Hey," he said suddenly, forcing a grin. "You still owe me for saving your ass in that hallway." "You mean when you body slammed a werewolf with your arm?" she said. "Yeah, sure. I'll buy you lunch when you're cleared for duty. And coffee, the fancy stuff, not the swill from the precinct machine. Don't push it." She stayed until the sun started to dip, painting the room in long shadows. When she stood to go, he walked her to the door, flexing his healing arm like he barely felt it. "Text me if anything feels off," she said, pausing on the porch. "I mean it, Danny. Anything. No matter how weird. You'll be the first to know," he promised. She started down the steps, then hesitated, turning back. "Hey, you ever wonder why it didn't finish us?" "The thing? The first one or the big one?" "Either," she said. "Both. It had us, more than once. Could have swiped that door off the hinges if it really wanted to. Could have jumped the car, but when the sun came up, it was just gone." He looked past her toward the patch of woods at the end of the block. The sky beyond was streaked orange and purple. "Maybe that's all it wanted," he said quietly. "To stick around long enough to make sure." He didn't finish the sentence. Behind him in the dim of the house, something ticked. Maybe the cooling metal of the heater, maybe something else. The air changed just for a second, thickening. Maria's hand tightened on the strap of her bag. "Yeah, maybe." She walked away. As the door clicked shut behind Ruiz, the last light of day slipped below the horizon. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. In the living room, the TV flickered soundlessly. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then cut off abruptly as if someone had clapped a hand over its muzzle. Ruiz stood very still in the dim hallway, his eyes closed, listening. He could hear it all of it. The neighbors arguing 3 houses down, a car idling at the top sign of the corner, a mouse skittering in the wall, the soft, slow thump of his own heart. And under it all, far away but getting closer, something else. A howl. Not quite human, not quite animal. It vibrated in his bones, in the place under his skin where the bite had sunk deep. It wasn't loud, not yet. More like an echo. A memory. A promise. His lips drew back from his teeth in something that was almost a smile and almost a snarl. Outside, the first stars pricked through the dark. The next full moon was only 28 days away. This story starts the way a lot of bad stories do, with a good deal. The Lockwood family, Dad Mark, Mom Rachel, and their 11-year-old son Jonah, weren't looking for a haunted house. They were just looking for affordable. They'd outgrown their cramped apartment. The rent was climbing, Dad's hours had been cut at work, and Mom was tired of listening to the upstairs neighbors fight every night like it was a sport. So when the realtor emailed a listing for a 4-bedroom historic home 12 minutes from town, with a yard, hardwood floors, and a mortgage cheaper than the rent, it felt like a miracle. It's a little older, the realtor admitted, flipping through her papers as they pulled up to the curb. But it has character. Character was one way to put it. The house loomed tall and narrow, all chipped blue paint and crooked shutters, like it had been left out in the rain too long. A sagging porch wrapped around the front, and the glass in the door was old enough to warp whatever was on the other side. Jonah pressed his hand against the car window and stared up. He liked it immediately. It looked like the kind of house that had secrets. Inside, the floors creaked in a way that made every step sound important. Dust motes spun in the sunlight from the tall front windows. There was a fireplace in the living room, built-in shelves, and a narrow staircase that climbed up and turned sharply, disappearing out of sight. "Wow," Mom whispered, running her fingers along a sun-faded wallpaper pattern. "This could be beautiful." "You're sure this price is right?" Dad asked the realtor. "Not missing any zeros?" She smiled a little too wide. "Nope. The owners are very motivated to sell." Jonah drifted toward the stairs. Something about the narrow hallway at the top tugged at him. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Like it was leaning in to listen. "You alright, kiddo?" Dad called. "Yeah," Jonah answered, but he had that prickly feeling you get when you know someone's behind you, even when you're alone. He turned, and nothing there. Just a long hallway and the empty rooms waiting. They moved in at the end of August. The first night everything was loud with cardboard and tape and the whine of the moving truck pulling away. It felt like the start of something good. New rooms to claim, a backyard big enough for actual grass, and a kitchen where Mom said she might finally bake again. By 10 o'clock the house settled. By midnight, it got serious. Jonah lay awake in his new room, staring at the ceiling. The street outside was quiet. No sirens, no upstairs neighbors, no late-night arguments through the thin walls. He should have been able to sleep like a rock. Instead, he heard footsteps. Not the normal kind. This was slower, measured, like someone walking heel to toe down the hallway, then up, then down again. It had to be Dad or Mom. Maybe they couldn't sleep either. The footsteps stopped right outside his bedroom door. The doorknob didn't move. Nobody knocked. The house just waited. Jonah's mouth went dry. "Dad?" he whispered, but nothing. He squeezed his eyes shut, pulled the blanket over his head and told himself that old wood made old noises, and he was just being stupid. Morning made it easy to laugh about. New house, Dad said around a mouthful of cereal. This place probably shifts and groans like crazy. You'll get used to it. Mom ruffled Jonah's hair. Your imagination just didn't get the change of address yet. Jonah shrugged and pretended that made him feel better. He didn't mention the footsteps had sounded like they were pacing, like somebody was deciding whether or not to come in. The small things started first. A box they were sure they'd left in the living room turned up at the top of the stairs. The tap in the upstairs bathroom turned itself on, just a slow, steady drip that no one remembered leaving. The hallway light flickered whenever someone walked under it and went back to normal the second they stepped away. Old wiring, Dad muttered, flipping the switch up and down a few times. I'll check the breaker later. One evening, Mom was unpacking dishes when Jonah wandered into the dining room and froze. The table was set. 4 plates, 4 glasses, silverware lined up neatly, napkins folded just so. He thought Mom had done it as a joke, like, look, we're fancy now. But when he called her in, her face changed. I haven't touched the table, she said. Dad walked in behind her and stopped. Okay, who's messing around? Not me, Jonah said. They stood there, the 3 of them, staring at the quietly perfect table. Then, one by one, the glasses started to tremble. Not much, just the faintest jitter, like someone was bumping the table in time with a heartbeat. There's probably a truck going by, Dad said too quickly. Out front, the street was empty. They ate in the living room that night. In the second week, Jonah was halfway down the stairs for breakfast when he heard it. A whisper. Soft, right next to his ear, so close he felt the tickle of breath. Where did you go? He jolted, hand grabbing the banister hard enough to hurt. He spun around, but no one was there. The hallway at the top of the stairs looked the same as always. Narrow, dim, and slightly crooked, like it was bending under its own memories. Mom? He called. In the kitchen, she answered, voice bright and far away. He swallowed and forced his legs to move. He didn't tell her what he'd heard. He didn't want that look adults give you when they want to believe you but don't. Over the next few days, the whisper came back. Always near the stairs. Always close. Sometimes it sounded like a kid. Sometimes it sounded like it was trying to be a kid and not quite pulling it off. Why did you leave? Come back. You're not supposed to be here. The words slipped between floorboards and through keyholes. So quiet that if he wasn't paying attention, he could pretend it was just the house settling. But he was paying attention. The house wanted him to. Jonah started to notice patterns. The shadows in the upstairs hallways were too dark, even in daytime. The bathroom mirror fogged up, but not in random swirls. Someone was tracing shapes in the condensation before it faded. Circles, little jagged lines that looked like teeth. One night, unable to sleep, he sat up in bed and stared at his closet. The door was cracked open, and he distinctly remembered closing it. Okay, no, he murmured, sliding out of bed. Nope, not tonight. He crossed the room, hand reaching for the knob. Something inside the dark moved. Not a lot, just the faintest shift, like someone standing there had leaned forward, excited. Every hair on his arm stood up. He backed away slowly, grabbed his desk chair, and wedged it under the knob. The next morning, the chair was across the room by his window. The closet door was standing wide open. The first time something touched him, he was brushing his teeth. It was Saturday, sunlight through the hallway window. Normal day, normal kid, foamy mouth. He spat into the sink and looked up. And in the mirror, the bathroom door behind him was just beginning to swing shut. He hadn't touched it. He turned around, heart jumping. Nothing was there. The door stopped halfway like someone had pushed it slowly and had gotten bored. He told himself the house wasn't level. Old hinges. Draft. He turned back to the sink and bent to rinse his toothbrush. Cold fingers slid across the back of his neck. It was a soft, quick touch, not a grab, not a claw. Just a curious, almost affectionate glide of something that felt like ice and static electricity at the same time. Jonah yelped, jerking backwards, toothbrush flying into the tub. He slapped a hand on his neck. Dry. No one behind him. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. For a half second, there was another face over his shoulder. A boy. Maybe a little younger than Jonah. Wet hair like he'd climbed out of a lake. Eyes too dark, as if pupils had swallowed everything else. Then the bathroom light flickered and the mirror showed only Jonah again, wide-eyed and pale. Behind the glass, just for a heartbeat, the boy's hand pressed flat where Jonah's neck should have been. By the time Jonah screamed for his parents, the mirror was fogged over, smooth and empty. Dad searched the house room by room, attic, basement, closets, even under the porch. Mom called their realtor. "Are you sure that nothing happened in this house before we moved in?" she asked. There was a pause long enough to be an answer. "Old houses have histories," the realtor said, "but nothing, officially disclosed. You know how small towns are. Lots of stories." "What kind of stories?" "Ma'am, I really don't..." "You sold us this house," Mom snapped. "If there's something we need to know, you need to tell us." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Just look up the Wilkes family. That's all I can say." That night, after Jonah went to bed with his light on and his door firmly open, Mom and Dad sat at the kitchen table with Dad's laptop. They found the article within minutes. A local tragedy at a historic Sycamore home. No pictures, just text. 4 years old. A family of 4. Parents and 2 boys. A gas leak overnight, they said. Faulty lines. The parents and younger brother never made it out of the house. The older boy, 8 years old, survived. He was found at the top of the stairs, coughing and screaming that his brother was still in his room. That he wouldn't come when he called. That the house wouldn't let him. Mom shut the laptop with shaking hands. "We're moving," she whispered. Dad stared at the closed laptop. "We can't just pick up and go, Rach. We put everything into this place. We'd lose the down payment. We're moving," she repeated, voice rising. "I don't care about the money. Something touched our son in the bathroom, and you saw his face." Their argument spiraled, hushed and sharp through the thin kitchen walls. Upstairs in his bedroom, Jonah listened. So did the house. The air in the vents vibrated with anger, carrying every frayed word. And in the unseen spaces, between the walls, above the attic, under the floorboards, something woke up all the way. After they read about the Wilkes family, the house stopped pretending. The nights bled together into a slow, careful terror. Doors slammed themselves after you walked through them, just a fraction too late. Like someone was right behind you trying to catch your heel. Lights turned on in rooms no one had entered. Once, at 3 a.m, Mom found every cabinet in the kitchen standing wide open. Every drawer pulled out, silverware scattered like a metal snowfall. "Did you do this?" she whispered to Jonah, who was hovering in the doorway in his pajamas. He shook his head, eyes huge. I heard it. Heard what? Someone looking, like they were mad at the noise things make. That same week, Jonah's drawings started to change. He'd always doodled in the margins of his homework. Tiny dragons, stick figures, little cartoons. But now, more and more, he drew the house. From the outside, from the inside, hallways that stretched too long, stairs that doubled back on themselves, windows that didn't exist. In every drawing there were people, not his family. Thin shapes in doorways, figures at the end of the hall, hands resting on the banister behind a smaller boy. Why are you drawing these? Mom asked one afternoon, trying to keep her voice light. He stared down at the paper. I'm not, he said. What do you mean you're not? I just start, and when I look, they're already there. The same night while they slept, someone scratched along the outside of his bedroom wall. Slow, long, like fingernails on skin. The house started picking favorites. Mom's coffee mug slid a few inches across the table every time she looked away, like it was inching closer to the edge. She'd move it back, frowning, and later find it again just a breath from falling. Dad's keys vanished twice. Once they turned up in the freezer, once in the attic balanced on the very edge of a beam like someone had carefully placed them there and then waited to see how long it would take him to find them. It didn't bother Jonah like that. It spoke to him. Sometimes it was the boy, sometimes it was something else, something using the boy's voice like a mask. When Jonah walked down the hallway, the air would grow heavy, pressing against his shoulders. The floorboards under his feet would go silent for a step or two, like he was walking on held breath. "You're not them," the whisper said one afternoon, as he paused at the top of the stairs. "Who?" he whispered back before he could stop himself. The house seemed surprised. The silence sharpened, listening harder. "The ones who left," it breathed. "The ones who burned. The one who stayed. I don't understand." "Don't go," it said urgently. "Don't leave me." The hallway light exploded, just a little pop and a shower of glass. Jonah flinched, covering his face. When he uncovered his eyes, tiny shards of bulb glittered on the floor like teeth. Mom tried to talk to someone at the church. The pastor came by one afternoon with a polite smile, a Bible, and a faint, skeptical look like he'd been told they were one of those families. He walked through each room, murmured a prayer, and placed his hand flat on the living room wall for a long moment. Then his face drained of color. "It feels crowded in here," he said softly. "What does that mean?" Mom asked. He swallowed. "I can bless the house, I can pray with you, but if I'm honest, whatever's here, it doesn't feel interested in leaving." "Can you make it go away?" Jonah asked. The pastor looked down at him, eyes kinder now. "Sometimes places hold on to pain, to people. Sometimes they just echo. I'm not sure this is an echo." "So what is it?" Dad asked. The pastor hesitated. "Hungry." They let him bless the house anyway. He sprinkled holy water along the windowsills and door frames. He prayed in each room, voice steady, even when the temperature dropped a few degrees every time he said, "And deliver us from evil." When he left, he pressed Mom's hand a second longer than necessary. "If things get worse instead of better," he said quietly, "don't wait. call me, or just leave. They didn't realize until that night that he'd forgotten his little silver cross on the living room side table. They found it in the morning, twisted like someone had tried to knot it with bare hands. It did get worse. The blessing was like tapping a sleeping animal with a stick. The very next night, Jonah woke up to the sound of breathing. Too loud, too close. He froze, every muscle in his body seizing. Something was standing beside his bed. He didn't see it right away. He felt it, the way you feel someone in a dark room. The air was colder on that side, heavy and thick. Slowly, heart pounding, he turned his head. For a moment, he thought it was his own reflection in the window, just a pale shape, roughly his height, standing between him and the glass. But his reflection was in bed. He could see himself, wide-eyed and terrified. The thing at the window was watching him. Its head tilted. Its face was wrong. Features smudged, like someone had started to sketch a boy and then erased parts of it. Don't. A whispered voice like wind under a door. Don't leave me alone. It reached for him with a hand that was all shadow and knuckle. He bolted. He launched himself out of bed, across the room and through the door, slamming it behind him. He practically flew down the hallway, feet barely touching the floor. By the time he reached his parents' room, he was sobbing. They let him sleep between them like he was 5 again. In the dark, the house listened to the 3 of them breathing in unsteady unison. Plaster cracked softly behind their bed. Down the hallway, Jonah's bedroom door slowly eased itself open. They lasted exactly 73 days. On day 69, the house tried to push Mom down the stairs. She didn't fall, but only because she grabbed the railing in time, knuckles going white as her heel slid off the edge of a step that suddenly seemed to tilt under her weight. On day 71, Dad woke up to a voice whispering inches from his ear. It should have been you. He turned on every light in the bedroom and left them on until morning. On day 72, all the taps in the house turned themselves on at once. Sinks, tub, the washing machine started to fill. The sound of water rushing through the old pipes roared like a crowd. Jonah waded through the hallway, ankles in cold water, as Mom and Dad scrambled to shut everything off. The house felt pleased, like it was practicing. That night, Dad sat down at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. We're done, he said. I don't care about the money, I don't care what we lose. I'm not letting this place get a chance to do to us what it did to them. Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. We'll pack what we can, leave the rest. Jonah watched them, relief and dread tangled tight in his chest. What if it doesn't let us go? He asked. The house tilted its head, listening. Day 73 started like any other. Gray sky, low clouds, the air heavy and damp like the world was holding its breath. They packed frantically, stuffing clothes in the trash bags, tossing essentials in the cardboard boxes, not bothering to label anything. The plan was simple, to get out, stay at a motel, and figure it out from there. Around noon, while Dad wrestled with a box in the trunk of the car and Mom taped up one last carton of dishes, Jonah went back inside to grab his backpack. He'd left it in his room next to the bed. The second he stepped onto the stairs, he felt it. The shift. The house went quiet in a new way. Not the normal hush of an empty hallway. This was the silence you get in the split second before lightning hits the ground. Halfway up, the third step flexed under his foot like it was breathing. Okay, he muttered. Just grab the bag and go. We're leaving. It's over. The hallway at the top of the stairs seemed longer than usual. The light bulb in the ceiling fixture flickered faintly. His bedroom door was open just a crack. He reached out with shaking fingers and pushed it wider. Everything was where he'd left it. Half-made bed, posters on the wall, backpack on the floor. And on the pillow, a second backpack. Old and faded, the fabric stiff with age, a little blue rocket ship patch peeling off the front. He knew without touching it that it wasn't his. The room's temperature dropped. His breath fogged in front of him. Behind him, the bedroom door eased shut. "Don't go," the voice said. It wasn't a whisper now. It was all around him, in his ears, his chest, his teeth. "Don't leave me again." The backpack flew off the bed and slammed into the wall beside him, bursting open. Old, charred notebooks skittered across the floor. The light blew out. The dark that replaced it was thick and full of faces. Hands, cold and invisible, pushed him backward. Not hard enough to throw him, just enough to steer him away from the door. Downstairs he could hear his parents yelling his name, muffled, distant, like they were shouting through a tunnel. "Jonah! Let's go, Jonah!" He tried to scream back, but his voice came out thin and useless. "Stay," the house said. Or the boy, or all of them at once. "Stay, stay, stay." The bedroom walls pulsed, shadows stretching long fingers across the floor. He felt something grip his ankles. For one blind, wild second, he saw it. The boy from the mirror, eyes huge and burning with desperate loneliness, clinging to Jonah's legs like he was the last branch over a cliff. Behind the boy, darker shapes crowded the corners. Taller, their features blurred and shifting like smoke, watching. They weren't trying to scare him now. They were trying to keep him. "Let go!" Jonah screamed, kicking out. "I'm not your brother. I'm not him." For a heartbeat, the grip loosened. The boy flinched like he'd been slapped. The shadows behind him surged forward, angry and hungry. The floor tilted. The house seemed to take in a breath. Then something else cut through the panic. Dad's voice, raw, furious in a way Jonah had never heard it before. "You can't have my son." The door slammed open. A light knifed into the room from the hallway. Dad barreled in like a linebacker, crashing through the thick air like it was water. He grabbed Jonah around the chest and yanked. And for a split second, Jonah felt the house fight back. A tug on his legs, a pressure in his lungs, a scream that wasn't his ricocheting off the walls. Then they broke free. Dad half dragged, half carried him down the hallway. The floor bucked under their feet like it was trying to throw them off. Picture frames flung themselves from the walls, glass shattering. At the top of the stairs, the air went ice cold. "Run!" Mom yelled from below, arms outstretched. They did. Behind them, the house roared, not with sound, but with every pipe, beam, and nail vibrating in furious, frustrated unison. The banister shook, the stairs flexed. One of the steps cracked clean through as Dad's foot left it. They hit the bottom and stumbled into the foyer. The front door slammed itself shut in their faces. For a second, they were trapped in the small, warped glass space, like flies under a cup. The air smelled like gas. Mom grabbed the doorknob. It burned her palm, but she twisted anyway, screaming, "Let us out." Then the lock clicked. The door flew open so hard it hit the siding. They spilled onto the porch. Behind them, the house went completely still. No creaks, no whispers, just the soft hiss of gas lines deep inside the walls. Dad didn't wait. He shoved them into the car, hands shaking, and jammed the keys into the ignition. As they pulled away from the curb, tires squealing, Jonah pressed his face to the window, breath fogging the glass. The house watched them go. In the upstairs window over the porch, a small figure stood perfectly still. The boy. He wasn't hazy now. he wasn't smudged. For the first time, Jonah could see him clearly. Wet hair, pale face, eyes too dark. He didn't look angry, he looked abandoned. As the car turned the corner, the figure lifted one hand in a slow, hopeless wave. Then the house blinked. The window went empty, and the Lockwoods didn't look back again. They never lived in another old house. They never went back to Sycamore Street. Not to talk to it, not to get closure. The few things they left behind stayed there. Some nights, in their new apartment, Jonah still woke up to the feeling of someone standing by his bed. He always turned on the light fast, just to be sure. It was never the boy. Whatever was in that house stayed where it was, waiting. The town never got rid of the property. Too expensive to tear down, too weird to keep renting out for long. People moved in, lasted a while, then moved out. Sometimes in the middle of the night. The listing goes up about once a year. Charming historic home, 4 bedrooms, great potential, motivated sellers. If you ever go house hunting near Sycamore and 11th, maybe you'll see it. Big blue house, crooked shutters, for sale sign on the lawn. If you slow down and look at the upstairs window, you might see a face watching you. If you're smart, you'll keep driving. If you're not, well, the house is always looking for someone new to stay. They say if you ever hike past the place where the trail markers disappear and the forest suddenly feels like it's holding its breath, and you see little bone totem from the branches, you turn around. Right then, no debate. No, just a little further. Because something put them there, and it does not like company. The trip had a name. The Man Trip. That's what Nate's wife had jokingly put in her calendar the first year. Man Trip, try not to die. And the group of friends just kept calling it that. Once a year, early fall, before the real cold settled in, 4 guys walked into the woods to pretend they were rough and rugged instead of tired 30-somethings with back pain and discount sneakers. There was Nate, pretty normal guy, tech job, overthinks everything. Drew, loud, bearded, CrossFit guy, lived on energy drinks and podcasts about optimizing your life. Kyle, dad of 3, permanent eye bags, carried the best snacks and the worst jokes. And then Mason, ex-army, quiet, wiry, the only one who actually understood the woods. If he said something about the weather, you listened. For 6 years, they went to the same general area in the Kettle Ridge. A nice, safe river camp, short hike from a dirt road, fishermen in the distance sometimes, other campers now and then. Signal if you climbed a hill and held your phone just right. Predictable. Last year, Drew decided predictable was boring. We're getting soft, he told them. Same spot every time? Nah, boys, we need a challenge this year. He said it in the group chat, then on the phone, then in person. If stubbornness burned calories, Drew would have been carved out of marble. Mason pulled out the topo maps like a disappointed camp counselor. Deeper means fewer trails, no signal, no easy way out if someone sprains an ankle or has a heart thing, he warned. You all sleep on the ground 1 weekend a year and now you want to reenact the Revenant? Drew grinned. Exactly, but with better snacks. They voted 3-1. Mason lost. So that year they pushed further, past their usual river, past the last trail marker, even past a little rock cairn someone had built as if to say, "Hey man, you sure about this?" They parked the truck on a chewed up dirt road, shouldered their packs and headed upslope into the ridge. At first nothing felt strange, just another hike. Boots, banter, and the clank of carabiners. The deeper they went, though, the quieter the world got. Birdsong thinned out, insects faded, underbrush came in thick patches and then suddenly vanished in oddly bare spots where the soil was dark and smooth like something had cleared it. Not fire, not erosion, but intention. After a few hours, thighs burning and shoulders aching under packs, they found a sloping little clearing ringed with pines. Flat enough for tents, close enough to water, nothing obviously wrong with it. Here? Nate asked. Mason scanned the tree line, the sky, the ground. Good enough for night one, he said. We'll push deeper tomorrow. They set up like they always did. Tents, fire ring, water filter at the stream, food bag hung up high. Everything was perfectly normal. Until it wasn't. They were sitting around the fire, full and relaxed, trading dumb stories by habit. Sparks popped. Somebody was complaining about gas prices. Somebody else was arguing about the best horror movie. That's when Nate realized what was wrong. He couldn't hear the wind. The fire crackled, their voices moved the air, but beyond that glow of orange, the forest stood weirdly still. No rustle, no whisper, no soft hiss of pine needles moving. He went quiet mid-laugh, listening. Drew noticed first. "What's up, dude? See a ghost behind me?" But Nate didn't answer, just tilted his head. One by one, the others followed his gaze. The silence, once they actually listened to it, was heavy. Not just calm night quiet. It felt like the whole forest was waiting for something. Kyle broke it with a shaky chuckle. Maybe everything's just asleep. Or the woods are sick of our jokes. The fire popped, sending a brief shower of sparks upward. Mason's jaw tightened. He stared past the fire right into the dark. "Sometimes it goes quiet when there's a predator nearby," he said. "Or before a storm. It doesn't have to be about us." Drew flicked on his headlamp, trying to break the mood. "If it's a predator, I'll flash my bank app at it. That'll scare anything off." They laughed, but it came out thin and wobbly. Eventually, tired enough to override unease, they crawled into their tents one by one, letting the fire die to coals. The forest stayed silent. Somewhere deep in the night, Nate woke up. No idea what time it was. The inside of the tent was washed in a dim off-white glow from the moon. His breath misted faintly and his sleeping bag was warm around him, but he was instantly, sharply awake. The fire was out, no crackle, no shifting embers. Under that stillness, a sound. A slow, dragging scrape. It circled the camp. His brain whispered bear, because that's what brains say first, right? But the rhythm wasn't right. It didn't pad or thump. It scraped, like something long and hard was testing the ground. From another tent, the rustle of a sleeping bag, and then Kyle's low whisper. "Maze, you awake?" Another rustle. Mason's voice tight and controlled. "Yeah, stay in your tent, don't talk." The scraping paused as if listening. Something brushed against the side of Nate's tent, real slow. Not a hard bump. Nothing like a misstep. Just a drag, like fingers tracing the fabric. A tall shadow passed between his tent and the faint glow where the fire had been. Too tall, too narrow. The head, if that's what it was, tilted as it moved. Every muscle in Nate's body locked. The thing circled once, twice, that scrape marking its path through the dirt. Then there was a metallic clang, sharp and out of place. Drew's voice broke the night. "Hey, hey," he yelled. "Get away from there." Mason hissed, "Drew, shut up." Too late. There was a wet, bone-deep impact, like a side of beef slammed into concrete. Andrew let out one short, choked cry, and then nothing. No second sound, no struggle. His tent collapsed like someone had stomped the middle of it. Kyle screamed, and Nate's own voice joined in without permission. Mason's zipper ripped open and heavy boots hit the ground. The forest, which had been dead still a second earlier, suddenly came alive with wind. Branches thrashed, leaves hissed, and in the chaos something heavy moved away, a stumbling, scraping retreat that faded fast. None of them went out to check, not until dawn broke. Morning light always makes nightmares feel smaller, until you unzip the tent and step out into proof. Drew's tent had folded in on itself, poles snapped, fabric crumpled. The sleeping bag inside had been torn open and flung aside. Synthetic stuffing clung in damp, red, smeared clumps. Blood soaked the ground. Heavy drag marks started at the ruined tent and led away into the trees. Something big had been pulled over the forest floor, leaving a dark smudge on the pine needles and bare dirt. The drag marks went 30 feet, then just stopped. No more disturbed needles, no more blood, no broken branches. As if whatever had hauled him had reached a line, taken one more step, and vanished. Nobody said much. Human brains do this funny thing. They start running down the list of reasonable explanations, even when nothing about the scene is reasonable. Mountain lion, bear, freak accident. Except no one could find a single paw print, no claw marks, no scat, nothing. Just that long, terrible smear ending at nothing. Kyle's legs went out from under him, dropping him into the dirt. "We have to go," he said. His voice was shaking. "We have to get help, search and rescue, something." Mason knelt, eyes scanning the scene like he could force tracks into existence. "Pack light," he said finally. "Only essentials. We head straight for the truck and call it in." He didn't comment on the missing tracks. They all saw it. None of them said it. Packs went on. Tents came down fast with shaking hands. No one ate. They started walking back the way they'd come. Normally, the hike out of the woods feels shorter. Landmarks are familiar. Feet know where they're going. And the promise of the car, even if it's an old pickup, pulls you along. This time, the sense of relief never came. After about an hour, they should have hit a little stream they remembered crossing the day before. Instead, they found a crooked pine with a distinctive lightning scar down the trunk, a jagged, pale seam. They passed that tree yesterday, from the other side. Everyone stopped dead. "Did we loop?" Nate asked, his voice tight. "No," Mason said too fast. He pulled out map and compass, checked, rechecked, recalculated silently. Same bearing. We didn't turn. Kyle pointed with a trembling hand. "That's the same tree. You called it nature's zipper, remember?" He had. They all remembered. Mason swallowed hard. "Terrain can mess with you," he said. "Ridges, gullies. Feel like you're circling when you're not. Just keep moving." They kept moving. An hour later, they hit the same shattered boulder. The same triangle of tree birches. The same patch of bare, unnaturally dark soil. Panic started chewing at the edges of Nate's vision. That's when he noticed the first charm. It dangled from a low branch, catching the corner of his eye. 3 small bones tied into a rough triangle with coarse, dark twine. Something like hair was looped around the joints, knotted so tight it made his fingers ache just looking at it. He stepped closer without realizing. "Nate," Mason snapped. "Don't touch that." "Wasn't going to," Nate lied, hand half lifted. Mason walked past him, slowly turning in place, scanning the trees. The charm wasn't alone. Now that they were looking, they saw more of them. Dozens, maybe hundreds, hung from branches, tucked into tree trunks, dangling off saplings. Some made of bone, some of twisted sticks, some just little bundles of skin or hide bound around things that rattled softly inside. They formed a rough half ring around the area. "Like a boundary," Kyle whispered. "Like those old stories, wards, totems, whatever." "Could be hunters," Nate said, desperate for something mundane. "Trail markers, or, I don't know, creepy deer deterrents?" "Or it's somebody's line," Mason said quietly, "and we're on the wrong side of it." The wind picked up just enough to stir the charms. They clicked and rattled together like a mouthful of loose teeth. A normal group of people might have taken the hint right there, stepped back over that line, decided whatever this is, it's not their business. But fear messes with logic, so does exhaustion. And something else was at work too. Something subtle, like fingers on the back of the neck nudging them deeper. They chose a new direction and tried again. Mason set a fresh bearing that should have walked them perpendicular to the original path. No way they'd circle back now. They'd either hit the ridge line or the logging road. Statistically impossible, he said, to end up in the same spot. They hiked for hours. Trees changed. Ground sloped differently. The forest felt new for a while. Then a familiar little bundle of bones turned slowly in the breeze, right at eye level. One charm became three. Three became a row. Before long, the charms were on both sides of them, swaying gently in perfect unison, even when the air felt perfectly still. "We're not walking in circles," Nate said. "We can't be. We changed direction." Kyle's breathing hitched. "Then how?" "We may not be the ones deciding where we're going," Mason cut in. No one liked hearing that out loud, but everyone had already felt it. The realization settled over them like a net. The forest was not just there, it was doing something. Cold camp that night. No fire at first. The thought of light felt like painting a target on themselves. They choked down dry energy bars, sipped water, watched the charms at the edge of their little clearing twitch now and then. Eventually, one by one, their bodies mutinied and demanded sleep. Sleep won. Night in that place brought a special kind of dream. Nate dreamed he was walking through his house back in the city, except instead of carpet, pine needles cushioned his steps, and the walls were narrow trunks that rose and twisted into a ceiling of branches. Every door he opened led to the same clearing. His wife stood in the kitchen, back turned, and when she finally faced him, her eyes were dark pits packed with moss. He woke up with his heart galloping. Something was whispering. At first, he thought it was the wind moving the charms. Then he heard his own name in it. "Nate." The voice sounded like Drew's. "Nate, man, it hurts. I think I broke my leg." It came from the tree line just beyond the glow of the dying coals. Hope is cruel. It doesn't care what you saw. It hears a faint voice and snaps everything else in half. Nate unzipped his tent a few inches and peered out. The forest was wet silver under the moon, every branch and trunk edged in cold light. Darker shapes were tense. Their little camp looked like a child's toy village dumped in dirt. Something moved at the edge of the clearing. Tall, thin, wrong. At first glance, it stood like a man, 2 legs upright. But its proportions were all off. Limbs too long, torso too narrow. Joints where joints had no right to be. Its back hunched like someone had strung it up on an invisible hook and let it sag. It faced away at first, head tilted, listening. The voice drifted out again. "Nate, come over here, bro." But the sound wasn't coming from its mouth. Its face was mostly smooth except for a long vertical seam running from where a nose should have begun all the way down past where the jaw should have ended. Like somebody had drawn a zipper down its skull and forgotten to add the actual zipper. That seam stayed shut while the voice worked, muscles under the skin twitching, vibrating. The sound crawled over Nate's skin. He shifted without meaning to, and the creature froze. Slowly, unnaturally smoothly, it turned its head toward the tent. Its eyes weren't right either. Too small, set too deep. No catch of the moon, no glint, just dull, pale beads that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. It stared straight at the gap in Nate's tent. The seam down its face peeled open, not sideways like a mouth, vertically. Skin stretched, tearing with a wet, sticking noise, revealing row after row of small, blunt teeth embedded like metal zipper teeth in the fleshy edges. When it spoke again, Drew's voice exploded out too loud, too sharp. "Nate, come here, man. It's safe." Layered under Drew were other sounds. A child crying, a woman calling for someone, fragmented pleas and sobs, all chopped up and stitched together inside that hideous vertical mouth. Nate slid the zipper down inch by inch, closing his tent, keeping his breathing as shallow as he could. The whispers circled the camp, frantic and coaxing. Something with too many joints ran a knuckled hand along the tent wall, indenting the fabric inches from Nate's face. Then the pressure withdrew. The whispers drifted away deeper into the trees. The charms rattled softly as if in agreement. Nate did not sleep again. By dawn, the clearing looked normal again. Steam rose off damp dirt. Tents sat where they'd left them. Birds even tried a tentative bit of song, cut short as if they'd thought better of it. Then they noticed Kyle's tent. Empty. From the front, it looked fine. Zipper closed, stakes in the ground, the lump of sleeping bag visible through the fabric. Walk around the back, though, and the truth showed itself. The rear flap hung wide open. The sleeping bag inside was rolled back, neat as if someone had just gotten up to pee. Flashlight by the door, boots gone. Mason followed the tracks away from camp. The creature's prints were there, those long, narrow, not quite hoof marks sunk deep into the wet soil. Beside them, for a while, were human footprints, bare, toes splayed from cold and wet. Kyle's. As the tracks continued, the human footprints began to change. Toes stretched, heels narrowed, the arch elongated. Step by step, the foot shape slid into something not human at all. By the time they reached the nearest line of charms, there was no difference between them and the creature's prints. The tracks ended at the boundary. The charms above them clicked gently. 4 men had come out here. Now there were 2. Nate looked at the empty space where the footprints stopped. "How do we get out?" he asked Mason. "You're the woods guy, right?" Mason just stared at the charms, at the trees on the other side. "It's using its territory like a funnel," he said finally. "Pushing us around. A cat doesn't chase a mouse at random, it herds it. Maybe we aren't meant to get out." "So we're in its trap?" Nate said. "Yeah," Mason answered softly. "We're in its trap." They tried running. Of course they did. They picked a direction and sprinted until lungs burned, branches tearing at clothes, packs swinging and thumping against their backs. Every time they thought they were making progress, the forest changed around them. Paths that looked clear from a distance ended in walls of thorns. Ridges that should have given them a view showed only more trees, stretching on and on like a copy-pasted background. The charms kept reappearing at the edges of their vision. By the second day, their legs shook constantly. Their lips were cracked. The fear had gone from sharp to deep and dull like an ache in the bone. By the third day, something worse had crept in. a sort of numb obedience. They camped where the forest let them, in little bare patches where no charms hung. They drank from streams that didn't seem to exist on Mason's map. They stopped talking about the road. They started talking quietly about the thing. They say hunters in some cultures leave offerings, Nate muttered once, fingers picking at the edge of a granola bar wrapper. Meat or whatever. Maybe if it gets something, it lets you go. Mason stared into the small, carefully shielded flame they finally dared to light again. It already took something, he said. Took Drew. Took Kyle. We didn't exactly volunteer. What if that's the deal? Nate said, voice barely audible. What if it wants all of us, one at a time, and that's how anyone ever gets out? The forest listened. The charms clicked. Don't go there, Mason said at last. We're not there yet. Yet. The words sat between them like a fifth presence. The storm hit like the sky finally got tired of holding itself up. 1 minute the canopy above was just gray and heavy. The next it was dumping water like someone opened a hatch. Rain hammered the leaves, wind shoved them sideways. Thunder rolled over the ridge in ugly, jagged booms. They sprinted downhill, sliding in the mud, looking for shelter. Boulders appeared ahead. Huge stones tumbled together ages ago. Between two of them yawned a narrow wedge of space. They squeezed in shoulder to shoulder, the rock cold and damp at their backs. Rain sheeted down just beyond the opening, forming a shimmering curtain. Lightning flash lit the world in white snaps. In those strobing moments, shapes flickered between the trees. Long-limbed things that didn't move quite right. Tall silhouettes half turned toward the boulder, appearing and vanishing with each lightning strike. Somewhere out in that chaos, something was singing. Not with words, with pitches. High and low tones layered and warbling, like whale song dragged over broken glass. It vibrated through rock, bone, and teeth. Don't listen, Mason yelled over the storm. Plug your ears if you have to. It wants you to move. Don't. They pressed their palms over their ears, but the sound seeped in anyway, humming through their ribs. The storm eventually softened. Thunder faded into distance. Rain slowed to a patter. The song stopped. Silence, heavy and loaded, filled the gap. Then came another sound. Footsteps. Wet boots on leaves, unsteady but human, approaching the boulders. A voice, hoarse and raw. Guys? Hey, is someone there? It was Drew, no question. The tone, the rhythm, the way he dragged out guys when he was whining. Nate lunged toward the gap. Mason grabbed him, fingers like iron on his jacket. Wait, Mason said. Where's it coming from? They both listened. The voice wasn't echoing from out in the trees. It was coming from directly above them. They tilted their heads back. The ceiling of their little shelter was just two massive stones leaning against each other, making a jagged lip of rock with a thin, dark space beyond. Something lay against that narrow space. Skin, pale, stretched taut, pressed into the gap like something big and soft had been poured there and was trying to ooze through. An eye stared down at them from the crack, too close, veined, unblinking. I found you, Drew's voice said. Come out, it's safe now. Beside the eye, a familiar vertical seam quivered and began to peel downward. The thing was practically plastered across the top of the stones, like it had thrown itself over their hiding place and flattened its body to fit. Nate froze. Not from bravery, but from the kind of raw terror that locks every muscle. Mason's hand moved. Years of training beat out shock. He yanked the handgun from his belt, a precaution everyone had quietly agreed was probably overkill when they packed, and fired straight up. In that cramped space, the shot was a cannon blast. The eye burst in a spray of thick, dark fluid that spattered the rocks, their faces, their clothes. It was hot and smelled like copper and sap and something sour. The creature screamed, not in Drew's voice now, in its own. The sound was almost worse than the sight. Metal grinding on metal, train brakes shrieking, a chorus of animals dying all at once. The stones vibrated. The weight above them vanished. Outside, the forest erupted into violent motion. Trees thrashed like they were being shoved aside by something massive. Branches cracked, charms broke off and rained down, clattering against trunks. "Now," Mason shouted. "While it's hurt, now or never." They ran. There was no plan, no careful bearing, no map consultation. Just raw, blind instinct shoving two exhausted men through the trees. Branches whipped their faces, mud sucked at their boots. The forest roared behind them, something enormous crashing into the trees, hitting some kind of unseen barrier and howling. The charms rattled and snapped as if whatever ancient agreement they represented was being tested, stretched to the limit. They burst out into a clearing neither of them recognized. That mattered. Up until then, the forest had felt like it was recycling the same handful of clearings, tree clusters, rock formations. Now, suddenly something new, a wide-open patch where old, rotten stumps stuck up like broken teeth. Beyond the stumps, trees grew in straighter lines, evenly spaced. "Logging cut," Mason panted. "They took trees here once. Close to a road, has to be." The air itself seemed to change. Crossing that line at the stumps felt like stepping from deep water onto dry land. Ears popped, the pressure behind their eyes eased. Above their heads, 3 little pieces of metal hung from a branch. A rusted nail, a bent key, an old pool tab, strung together like a cheap charm. They chimed softly as wind moved past. And for the first time in days, that whispering, wrong way feeling in the back of Nate's mind went quiet. "Keep going," Mason said. "Don't look back." And they did. They pushed through the evenly spaced trunks until the trees thinned, the ground widened, and a rutted strip of dirt cut across their path. The road. The same smoking old sign half chewed by rust. The same trash in the ditch, the same scar where their truck tires had gouged the shoulder when they parked. And there, like a faithful dog, sat the truck, exactly where they'd left it. Mason leaned his forehead against the hood and laughed once, a short, broken sound. "We made it," he said. The words didn't feel triumphant. They sounded like someone trying to convince themselves. Search and rescue teams later found that road. The trailhead, some spent shells, a smudge of blood at the first campsite. They did not find the charms. They did not find the collapsed tent, the drag marks, the boulder shelter, or any trace of the weird, looping section of forest Nate and Mason described. According to maps, the Kettle Ridge is big, but not that big. According to the official story, 4 guys went camping. 2 of them must have gotten lost, fallen in the river maybe, or gotten turned around and wandered somewhere else entirely. Maybe a bear, maybe hypothermia. Nature is cruel and people go missing in the woods all the time. That's what the reports say. But here, by the fire, is the part that doesn't make it into official reports. A few weeks after they got out, Nate was cleaning his backpack, getting ready to store it in the closet and try to pretend he still liked hiking. Something small and hard fell out of an inner pocket. A triangle of bone. 3 pieces tied together with coarse, dark hair. He stared at it for a long time, heart trying to punch a hole in his ribs. Then he did the reasonable thing. He threw it away. Took it all the way to the big dumpster behind the building. Listened to it thunk against plastic bags and muffled trash. He slept a little easier that night, until about 3 in the morning. A soft, repetitive clacking woke him up. Bone on wood. It came from the hallway outside his bedroom. He got up, opened the door, and looked down the hall toward his daughter's room. There, hanging neatly from the smoke detector, was the same little triangle of bone, gently swaying, hair loop knot perfect. In the morning, his wife assumed it had been a prank, buddy thing, camping joke. Ha ha, so spooky. He threw it away again. This time, he snapped the bones, broke the hair, tossed the pieces in different bins. He even left the apartment with the trash to be sure. The next night, no clacking. But in the morning, when he went to grab his keys, he noticed something else. On the key hook by the door, one of his spare keys, old and unused, had been tied together with a bent bottle cap and a bolt in a little triangle. The wire from a bread bag twisted around them in a perfect loop. Charming, literally. He called Mason that day. Mason answered on the fourth ring, voice sounding like it had been sandpapered. "You seeing things?" Mason asked, before Nate could even say hello. "Hearing things?" "Sometimes," Nate admitted. "Sometimes it sounds like Drew in the TV static, or Kyle in the shower drain. I keep finding stuff, charms. I get rid of them and they come back." There was a long pause. "Then it tagged us," Mason said finally. "Like you tag a file. Like a GPS marker. We stepped over its line and didn't pay the full bill. That doesn't just stop because we walked away." "Why did it let us go then?" Nate asked. "At the road." Another long silence, and when Mason spoke, the words came out flat. "What makes you think it did?" They both see things now, bone shapes where nothing should be, strange hair loops tangled on bedroom doorknobs, overly quiet moments when the house feels like the forest did, breathless and waiting. Sometimes late at night, Nate hears something in the hallway, a slow, dragging scrape, like whatever walked around his tent on that first night. Sometimes in the dishwasher hum or the fridge motor, voices layer themselves. Drew laughing, Kyle muttering, someone else whispering. Sometimes the charms on neighbors' porches chime with no wind at all, and the rhythm he recognizes from those days in the trees. The worst part isn't the sounds, though. It's the feeling that the boundary didn't stay in the forest. It moved. Into their homes, into them. Because creatures like that don't just defend territory, they expand it. They mark what they claim. And maybe, just maybe, that thing with the vertical mouth and the stolen voices decided that two humans who crossed its line and lived were too valuable to waste. Organic little mobile signposts, walking pieces of its forest. So if you ever find yourself on a trail that keeps going past where the map says it should, if the birds go quiet all at once, if you start seeing little bone or metal triangles hanging from branches in a way that feels less like decoration and more like warning tape, that's your line. That's where you stop, turn around, and go back to the car. Complain about bugs, post a selfie like everyone else, and be grateful you're bored. Because out past that line, something old is watching. And it really, really doesn't want you there. Unless, of course, it decides it wants you everywhere instead. So tell me, if you were out there and the trail markers disappeared, the woods went quiet, and you started seeing those little bone charms in the trees, would you keep going, or would you turn back? Let me know down in the comments. I love reading how you would handle nights like this. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps more lost souls stumble onto Midnight Delight. Make sure you subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next time we wander somewhere we really shouldn't. Thank you for spending your night in the dark with me. Until next time, if you hear something circling your tent, just remember, some lines in the forest aren't meant to be crossed. Sleep well, if the forest lets you.